Good evening, friends. We've all heard the ancient story, a great rain that flooded the world, a colossal ark, and one family adrift on a boundless ocean with all the animals of the earth. But have you ever wondered, in those long, isolated days and nights, what did they eat? So now, dim the lights. And as the chimes sound, let's step into tonight's story together. You are standing inside a massive wooden structure. The air is thick with a strange and layered perfume. First, there is the scent of the wood itself, rich and resinous, with the sharp, clean fragrance of ancient trees. The timber used to build this great vessel is called gopher wood in the old scriptures. What kind of wood is that, exactly? To be honest, no one truly knows. The term appears only once in the entire Bible, a classic hapax legomenon, a word so unique that theologians and historians have debated its meaning for millennia. Some suggest, based on phonetics, that it was likely cypress wood. The ancient Greek word for cypress sounds a bit like the Hebrew word gopher. Cypress is rich in natural oils, making it inherently rot-resistant, an ideal material for shipbuilding in the ancient world. This theory feels solid, logical. Other scholars believe the word describes not a type of wood, but a process, perhaps laminated planks or wood treated with pitch. After all, the instructions immediately mention coating the ark, inside and out, with pitch. The debate continues. But for you, right now, the most immediate sensation is this grounding, reassuring aroma, a blend of piney branches and tar, almost like turpentine. It forms the base note of the air within the ark, the background scent that will become the most familiar constant in the year to come. Layered on top of this woody foundation are more penetrating aromas, the smell of food. Thousands upon thousands of pounds of it. At your feet are the last few sacks of grain to be loaded. Your brothers are hauling enormous clay jars and wicker baskets into the deep recesses of the hull. You bend down and hoist a heavy sack, the rough weave of the fabric scratching against your arms. It's filled with barley, the golden treasure of the Mesopotamian plains, the very bedrock of your civilization. For as long as you can remember, every meal has revolved around it. It can be ground into flour for simple, unleavened flatbreads, or fermented into a cloudy but nourishing beer, a drink people call liquid bread. You know that the stores of barley on this ship are enough to feed the 8 of you and countless animals for a very, very long time. You follow the line of your family, stepping carefully into the belly of the ark. It's like a colossal, three-dimensional warehouse. Faint light struggles in through high ventilation slits, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Everywhere you look, provisions for the coming year are stacked high. Giant pottery jars known as pithoi stand shoulder to shoulder, some half as tall as a man. They are the ancient world's walk-in pantry, carefully secured in wooden frames to prevent them from shattering in the inevitable rocking of the sea. They are filled with all manner of legumes, red lentils, round chickpeas, and peas of every color. Dried, these beans can last for an incredibly long time and are a vital source of protein. The scriptures mention that in the time of your ancestor Abraham, a thick, hearty soup made from red lentils was a common and beloved meal. Besides the staple grains, there are heaps of fruit, not fresh, of course. You see clusters of grapes withered into sweet raisins. Figs and apricots have been pressed into dense, thick cakes, a method that makes them easy to store and transport. But the most abundant of all are the dates. Hailed as the bread of the desert, this fruit is the most generous gift of your homeland. The date palm was one of the first fruit trees ever cultivated in Mesopotamia. A single tree can bear fruit for over 60 years with astonishing yields. Dried dates are as sweet as honey, serving as both a snack and an essential sweetener, providing a powerful burst of energy. You can't resist snatching one from an open basket and popping it in your mouth. The familiar, caramel-like sweetness instantly melts on your tongue, temporarily soothing the knot of anxiety in your stomach. You venture deeper. The air grows more complex. You detect the rich smell of oils. Small pottery jars hold clarified butter, or ghee, and various plant-based oils, primarily sesame and flaxseed. There is olive oil, too, but it is rarer, as olive trees grow mainly in the hill country, far away. These fats are not just for cooking. They are a primary source of calories, of warmth. In one corner, you even see large crocks of pickles, cucumbers, and radishes preserved in salt and vinegar, promising a welcome tang of sourness to awaken your palate during the long, monotonous voyage ahead. Finally, you reach the deepest, darkest part of the hold. You raise your oil lamp, its light flickering across the final storeroom. Here lies the bulkiest cargo, not for you, but for the neighbors who are about to board. Massive, tightly compressed bales of hay are stacked to the ceiling, emitting a dusty, sweet grass scent. This is the fodder for the cattle, the sheep, the deer, and all the other herbivores. Beside them are even more mountains of grain, reserved for the birds and various omnivores. You set down the last sack of barley and straighten up, stretching your aching back. You look around. This vessel is less a boat and more a floating seed bank of civilization. It holds not only the spark of life, but everything needed to sustain a way of life. From the most basic grains and beans to the fats and pickles that provide flavor, to the dried fruits that offer a moment of pure pleasure. Everything here originates from the land beneath your feet, the land known as the Fertile Crescent. You are, in essence, lifting the entire Mesopotamian dinner table and placing it inside this ark of isolation. Outside, the sky has turned a menacing, leaden gray, as if the first drop of rain is holding its breath, waiting to fall. You take a deep breath yourself. This complex, layered scent of cypress, pitch, dust, dry grass, and a universe of food, this will be the entirety of your world's smell for the next year. The rain finally begins to fall. At first, it's just a soft, sporadic tapping on the massive roof of the ark, a distant, muffled drumbeat. But soon, the sound merges into a continuous, deafening roar. You feel as if you are inside a giant drum, the entire world outside swallowed by the thunderous noise. The ark begins to sway gently. The rising water is lifting you, separating you from the solid ground you have always known. Through a crack in a vent, you peer outside. All you can see is a gray, watery curtain. The world you knew is rapidly disappearing. This is your first morning on the ark. No one speaks. Every face is a mask of mixed emotions, fear, confusion, and a strange, quiet sense of relief. Your father, Noah, breaks the silence. "It is time for breakfast," he announces. The suggestion feels surreal, almost absurd, yet it is profoundly right. Nothing anchors the soul and soothes a troubled heart quite like a warm meal. Your family's living quarters, your temporary home, are on the top level of the ark. It's the most logical design. Of the ark's 3 decks, the top is for humans, the middle for the animals, and the bottom for storage and waste. This layout is not just for comfort, it is for sanitation and safety. Separating the human living space from the animals minimizes the overwhelming smells and noise, and makes management far easier. You are deeply grateful for this design. Even through the thick wooden planks, you can faintly hear the cacophony from the middle deck, the lowing of cattle, the bleating of sheep, and other unidentifiable cries filled with unease. The kitchen is a simple nook in the corner of your living space, a hearth made of stone and clay, a few clay pots of various sizes, and a rack holding wooden spoons and ladles. For this first meal, your mother decides on the simplest of foods, a barley porridge. In Mesopotamia, it's often just called mush or gruel. For a time, archaeologists believed this simple porridge was the staple diet of the common Mesopotamian, eaten 3 times a day. But as more cuneiform tablets were deciphered, a much richer culinary world was revealed with hundreds of soups and over 300 types of bread. Still, on this first morning on the ark, a simple, warm, and easily digestible meal is undoubtedly the perfect choice. The preparation is swift. Your sister-in-law scoops several large spoonfuls of ground barley flour and some cracked barley groats from a jar into a pot. Your job is to add the water. It comes from a large cistern connected to a rainwater channel on the roof, and it still carries the fresh, clean scent of the rain. The fire is lit, the wood crackling in the hearth. Soon, the porridge begins to bubble, releasing a simple, wholesome, grain-filled aroma. Your mother adds a pinch of salt and a spoonful of golden ghee. The fat melts across the bubbling surface, and the aroma instantly deepens. She also chops some leeks and onions you brought aboard yesterday, stirring them into the pot. The porridge is served in rough earthenware bowls, still too hot to eat. The 8 of you sit around a simple wooden table, each cupping a bowl, feeling its warmth seep into your hands. Outside the window is the end of the world. But in this small space, a bowl of porridge holds the shape of a home. You scoop up a spoonful with a wooden spoon, blow on it gently, and bring it to your lips. The rustic flavor of the barley, the richness of the butter, the fundamental saltiness, and the subtle sweetness released by the softened leeks and onions. It is all so familiar, so real. This taste tells you that even though the world has been turned upside down, life goes on. Alongside the porridge is another staple, beer. Of course, this is nothing like the cold, crisp beer we drink today. Ancient Mesopotamian beer was made from fermented barley malt and was left unfiltered, so it was thick and cloudy with bits of grain floating in it. Its alcohol content was low, but it was rich in vitamins and proteins, making it a crucial source of nutrition. That's why it was called liquid bread. People often drank it through a reed straw with a filter at the end to avoid the coarse dregs. Did you know that humans may have been brewing and drinking beer even longer than they've been baking bread? Some scholars have proposed a bold hypothesis. The initial motivation for humanity to transition from a nomadic lifestyle to settled agriculture wasn't to grow grain for bread, but to secure a stable supply of barley for brewing beer. It's a long-standing debate. Which came first, bread or beer? And there is still no definitive answer. You don't use a straw. You drink the beer straight from the bowl, consuming the grain fragments along with the liquid. It tastes sour, with a unique tang of fermentation, more like a liquid food than a beverage. The warm porridge and the slightly sour beer settle in your stomach, and a wave of warmth spreads through you, chasing away the morning chill and a fraction of your fear. You listen to the ceaseless rain outside and the gradually quieting sounds of the animals on the middle deck. This ark, this vast floating sanctuary, finally begins to feel like home, all because of this simple breakfast. There are no prayers during this meal, no conversation, only the sounds of chewing and swallowing. But in that shared silence, an invisible force is knitting your small family back together. You know that from this day forward, this will be your new normal. Day after day, you will fight back against the great unending flood with the simplest of foods on this ark, adrift and alone. On the second day, as the sound of rain remains the world's only soundtrack, a new rhythmic music joins the chorus. It is a heavy, grinding, percussive sound, a rhythmic crunch. This sound will become one of the main themes of your daily life for the next year. It is the symphony of the millstones, played by your entire family as you grind the day's grain. The porridge from yesterday's breakfast was made with pre-ground flour, but that was just for the first day. To supply bread and other grain-based foods for 8 people, 3 meals a day, you must grind fresh flour every single morning. Your mill is a set of simple stone grinders in a corner of the living quarters. Archaeologists call them saddle corns. Each consists of 2 stones, a large, slightly concave base stone shaped like a saddle, and a smaller, oval-shaped handstone, or rubber, that you can grip with both hands. To use it, you must kneel before the base stone, grasp the handstone, and lean forward, using your body weight to push and pull it back and forth, crushing the grains beneath it. You kneel at one of the corns, mimicking your mother. You place a small pile of golden wheat berries at one end of the saddle stone. Taking a deep breath, you push the handstone forward with all your might. The kernels caught between the 2 rough stone surfaces burst with a crisp, crackling sound and a sandy friction. You pull the stone back and repeat the motion. It is incredibly tedious, physically demanding work. Soon, beads of sweat form on your brow, and your arms and back begin to ache. You watch your mother and sisters-in-law. Their movements are fluid and powerful, as if they have performed this ritual 1,000 times. Their bodies sway in rhythm with the push and pull of the stone, a kind of ancient, necessary dance. With several querns working at once, the grinding sounds rise and fall, weaving together into a monotonous yet life-affirming symphony. A pleasant aroma gradually fills the air, the nutty, earthy fragrance released when fresh grains are crushed. A fine, pale yellow powder spills from the edges of the stones, piling up around the base. You pinch a little between your fingers. It's not as silky as you might imagine. It's coarse and granular. This is the hallmark of stone ground flour. It's a true whole grain flour. In this process, all three parts of the grain, the starchy endosperm, the fibrous bran, and the nutrient-rich germ, are preserved. This flour is incredibly nutritious, but its texture is rough, and the bread it makes is dense and heavy. Modern industrial roller mills, in their pursuit of white color and fine texture, sift away the bran and germ. The result is prettier and softer, but a great deal of nutrition is lost. Another advantage of the saddle quern is its slow grinding speed, which generates very little heat. This is crucial. Excessive heat can destroy the fats and vitamins in the grain's germ, causing the flour to spoil more quickly. In an environment like the ark, where long-term food storage is paramount, this low-heat, cold milling process is the wiser choice. As you struggle to push the stone, you feel the flour beneath your hands. It is only slightly warm. However, this ancient method has a hidden side effect. You notice that as the stones rub against each other, nearly invisible particles of stone dust are flaking off and mixing with the flour. Centuries later, archaeologists studying the teeth of ancient human remains would discover severe dental wear, caused by long-term consumption of stone-ground flour. The tiny quartz particles in the flour acted like sandpaper, day after day, grinding down the enamel of their teeth. So, it's predictable that after a year on the ark, your family's dental health might not be at its best. It's a small price to pay for a diet that is truly all-natural, with no additives. The freshly ground flour is gathered up. Part of it is used to make today's lunch, a very common unleavened barley flatbread, something like a modern pita or naan. The recipe is simple. The coarse flour is mixed with water, a little salt, and a dash of olive oil, then kneaded into a slightly rough dough. You watch as your mother divides the dough into small portions and flattens them into round discs with the palm of her hand. The fire in the hearth is already hot, and a flat piece of earthenware, a baking stone, is sizzling. Your mother places a disc of dough onto the hot surface. With a sharp TSSS sound, the surface of the bread immediately puffs up with small blisters. Soon, the aroma of toasted grain, mixed with a hint of smoke, fills the air. The bread is cooked until it's golden brown on both sides, with a few charred spots. You pick up a freshly baked flatbread, tossing it from hand to hand because it's so hot. You break it open and see the coarse, dense crumb inside. You take a bite. The texture is firm and chewy, full of the pure, unadorned flavor of the grain. It's different from any bread you've ever eaten. It's not soft or sweet, but it possesses a substantial, satisfying quality that fills your belly. As you chew the bread, you listen to the SHHH crunch of the millstones, which continues in the background. The sound is no longer just monotonous noise. It has become the heartbeat of the ark. Every push, every pull, every crushing motion is an act of converting stored energy into life itself. In this isolated, water-bound world, the symphony of the millstones, which begins every morning, announces the start of a new day in the most fundamental way. It sustains your very survival. It is a constant reminder that even in the most uncertain of times, as long as there is grain to be ground, as long as this symphony can be played, there is order in your life, and there is hope for the future. The ark floats on a boundless expanse of water. As far as the eye can see, the water and sky are a single monolithic shade of gray. It's impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. You find yourself living in a great paradox. You are surrounded by more water than the world has ever seen. Yet you must carefully ration every single drop of drinkable water. Because the water outside is the water of destruction, while the water stored inside the hull is the water of life. Today, your task is to inspect and maintain the ark's water supply system. That might sound like a modern term, but you're about to discover that this ancient wooden vessel is indeed equipped with a cleverly designed, self-sufficient water management system. Its core principle is based on humanity's oldest wisdom, rainwater harvesting. You climb the ladder to the top deck. The roof of the ark is enormous. It is not flat but sloped, designed to channel water toward a large central opening, the sohar, or window to the heavens. This opening not only provides light and ventilation for the top deck, but is also the main intake for the entire water collection system. The roof acts as a giant funnel, gathering the relentless rain and directing it here. Below the window, a network of pipes made of clay or wood channels the collected rainwater down into large reservoirs deep within the hull. Several massive tanks, likely made of wood or lined with a waterproof material. This kind of large-scale rainwater harvesting was not uncommon in the ancient world. From the rock-cut cisterns of the Indus Valley to the aqueducts and reservoirs scattered across the Roman Empire, humans learned early on how to capture this gift from the sky. Sailors on long sea voyages would spread out canvas sails or animal hides to collect precious rainwater to supplement their dwindling reserves. The design of the ark, it seems, took this ancient technology to its absolute extreme. According to some modern calculations, a rainfall of just 1 inch per week would have been enough to keep the ark's reservoirs full. And during the 40 days and nights of torrential downpour at the beginning of the flood, the supply was, of course, more than abundant. However, the collected rainwater isn't always clean. It might be mixed with atmospheric dust and various impurities washed down from the roof. More importantly, water stored for long periods can easily become stagnant, breeding bacteria and going foul. So, before it can be drunk, it must be purified. You move to the purification area. Here, several large clay jars are propped up on stands, each with a small hole in the bottom. These are your water filters. You lift the lid of one jar and see layers of filtering material inside. At the bottom is a layer of fine sand, followed by coarse sand and gravel. And on the very top is the most critical layer, black charcoal. Rainwater is ladled from the reservoir and poured slowly into these jars. The water gradually seeps through the layers of charcoal, gravel, and sand, eventually dripping out of the small hole at the bottom into a clean container below. Water purification with charcoal is another piece of ancient wisdom that spanned multiple civilizations. Sanskrit texts from as early as 4000 BC mention filtering water through charcoal to improve its quality. The ancient Egyptians also knew that charcoal could remove odors and foul tastes. The principle, as we understand it today, is simple: adsorption. When wood is burned at high temperatures to create charcoal, it develops a porous internal structure with a vast surface area. These microscopic pores act like magnets, trapping impurities, pigments, and some harmful substances, rendering the water clear and tasteless. You watch the clean water drip from the bottom of the jar, forming a steady trickle. The process is slow, an exercise in patience. You catch a little of the purified water in a wooden cup and take a sip. It has no odor, only the pure, sweet taste of water. This simple, seemingly crude system is the lifeline for every living being on the ark. It transforms the raging, filthy floodwaters outside into the pure, life-sustaining spring within. You finish your inspection, ensuring all the pipes are clear and the charcoal in the filter jars is plentiful. Standing in the belly of the ship, listening to the endless drumming of the rain, you feel a profound sense of respect for the builder of this vessel, your father. He didn't just build a giant wooden box that could float. He built a self-sufficient, living ecosystem. A system capable of transforming the wildest energy of the heavens into the most gentle source of life within its walls. In this world drowned by water, the ability to control water is the ability to control life itself. And this simple yet efficient water system is the engineering marvel that ensures your survival in this catastrophe. Every morning, while you are still asleep on the top deck in the human quarters, the middle deck of the ark is already stirring. That is the animal world. A vast space filled with a symphony of sounds, a universe of smells, and the constant rhythm of life. And what awakens this world each day is the eternal demand for food. Today, it is your turn, along with your older brother, to prepare the day's feed for the herbivores. You push open the heavy wooden door to the middle deck, and a thick, potent wave of air hits you, a mixture of hay, animal musk, and the sharp tang of fermentation. You wrinkle your nose instinctively. The middle deck is partitioned into countless stalls and enclosures. Beams of light pierce through the ventilation slits on the sides, cutting through the dusty air. You see cattle, sheep, deer, antelope, camels, herbivores of all shapes and sizes, pacing in their pens, chewing their cud, or staring at you with expectant eyes. Your job is to haul massive, rock-hard bales of hay from the storage area to each enclosure and distribute them. This hay is the result of months of harvesting and drying countless fields before you boarded. It is the sole source of food for these large herbivores for the entire year. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and utterly exhausting. The hay dust and chaff make your nose and throat itch, and the sharp stalks scratch your exposed skin. You toss a large bundle of hay into a cattle pen. A cow immediately lumbers over, curls its rough tongue around a clump of hay, and begins to chew. Watching it, a question pops into your mind. How can this dry, tough, seemingly nutrient-poor grass possibly sustain such a massive body? Your brother sees the confusion on your face. He laughs, brushing some hay off your shoulder, and gives you a lively lesson in animal digestion. He tells you that animals like cattle, sheep, and deer are called ruminants. They have a very special stomach with 4 compartments: the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. When they first eat grass, they chew it only briefly before swallowing. This coarse material enters the first and largest stomach, the rumen. Think of it as a giant fermentation vat, your brother says, pointing at the cow. There's no stomach acid in there. Instead, it's home to billions and billions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and protozoa. These magical little creatures can do something that humans and many other animals can't. They can break down the tough cellulose and plant cell walls. They ferment the cellulose into something called volatile fatty acids, and that is the cow's primary source of energy. See that one over there, he says, pointing to another cow lying down, its mouth moving constantly as if chewing on something invisible. She's chewing her cud. That's called rumination. It's where they get their name. During periods of rest, they regurgitate softened clumps of food from the rumen back into their mouths for a second, more thorough chewing. This process not only grinds the food into smaller particles for the microbes to work on, but it also mixes in a huge amount of saliva. An adult cow can produce 50 to 80 quarts of saliva a day. The saliva is alkaline, which neutralizes the acids produced during fermentation, maintaining a stable environment for the microbes in the rumen. Only after this second chewing is the food swallowed again to continue its journey through the other stomach compartments. This complex digestive system is like a built-in, highly efficient biorefinery capable of extracting maximum energy from the lowest quality raw materials. It is precisely because of this incredible biological superpower that the herbivores on the Ark can survive on a monotonous diet of dry hay. You finish your work for the day, covered in sweat and chaff. You look back at this noisy, bustling animal world with a newfound understanding of your high-volume meeting neighbors. The challenge of survival on the Ark is not just a human one. These animals, with their unique and somewhat bizarre physiological adaptations, are fighting this battle alongside you. Their powerful digestive systems are, in themselves, a critical component of the voyage's success. Without them, all this hay would be nothing but a useless pile of dry grass. Time on the Ark is marked by mealtimes. When the symphony of the millstones fades and the clamor of feeding the animals subsides, the afternoon sun casts a hazy patch of light through the main window onto the kitchen floor. It is time to prepare lunch, and today's lunch is something special. Your mother brings out a small clay tablet covered in cuneiform script. It is her treasured recipe book. This tablet records an ancient Babylonian dish, a lamb stew. Of course, on the Ark, fresh lamb is an impossible luxury. You will be using dried and salted lamb or goat meat prepared before you set sail. You lean over to look at the tablet. You recognize some of the characters. Asterisk meat is used. You prepare water. You add fine-grained salt, dried barley cakes, onion, Persian shallot, and milk. You crush and add leek and garlic. Asterisk. Just a few lines, but they paint a vivid picture of an ancient kitchen full of life and flavor. The cooking begins. Your job is to prepare the dried, salted meat. You cut it into small pieces and soak it in fresh water to draw out some of the salt. Meanwhile, at the hearth, your mother melts a piece of sheep's tail fat in a clay pot. The fat-tailed sheep is a unique breed from Mesopotamia. Its tail capable of storing a large amount of fat, which is a prized source of cooking oil for the local people. As the pot heats up, the fat renders, releasing a rich, wild, meaty aroma into the kitchen. Next, chopped onions are added to the pot and sautéed until they turn translucent and release their sweet fragrance. Then the drained pieces of lamb are tossed in, searing in the hot fat until they are lightly browned. Hot water is poured into the pot, covering the meat, and a cloud of white steam instantly rises. Now, it's time for the soul of the dish. From a small spice pouch, your mother carefully pours out some dried, shriveled bulbs that look like tiny onions. Persian shallots. Their flavor is unique, a sharp, pungent taste with an underlying sweetness, a key component of this stew's flavor profile. In the modern world, it remains an important spice in Middle Eastern cuisine, but it is hard to find elsewhere. Another key ingredient is the barley flatbread you made this morning. Your mother takes a few pieces of the hard, dry bread and crushes them into coarse crumbs and powder with a stone. Most of the crumbs are added to the pot to act as a natural thickener, giving the stew a hearty consistency. The larger pieces are set aside to be sprinkled on top at the end, much like modern croutons, for a bit of crunch. The stew simmers, bubbling gently. Its color gradually turns a creamy white as your mother stirs in a measure of sheep's milk. In ancient times, milk from sheep, goats, or cows was a common liquid base for stews, lending a richer flavor and a velvety texture. Finally, you add the garlic and leeks, which you've crushed into a paste in a stone mortar. They are added at the end of the cooking process to impart a fresh, pungent aroma. Now, all that's left is to cover the pot and let it simmer over low heat until the lamb is tender and falling apart. As you wait, the kitchen fills with a mouth-watering aroma, a perfect fusion of rich meat, sweet onions, pungent spices, creamy milk, and earthy grains. At last, it is time for lunch. The thick stew is ladled into bowls, and the reserved breadcrumbs are sprinkled on top. Each of you is given a fresh piece of barley flatbread for dipping. You tear off a piece of the bread and use it to scoop up a tender piece of lamb drenched in the rich sauce. You bring it to your mouth. The flavor is a profound comfort. The savory melt-in-your-mouth lamb, the thick sauce that coats your tongue, the unique, surprising flavor of the Persian shallot that dances on your palate. The coarse bread soaks up the sauce, becoming soft and delicious. For a moment, this meal makes you forget where you are. You forget the monotonous world of water outside the window. The memory of taste is so powerful, it instantly transports you back to your home on the sun-drenched plains before the flood. This bowl of stew from a time before warms your stomach and soothes your soul. It tells you in the most direct way possible that even if civilization has been washed away, the recipes carved on clay tablets and the flavors carried in memory can travel through time, keeping you connected to your past. While the Ark is a sanctuary, it is by no means a sterile environment. In fact, for certain uninvited guests, this vast, warm, humid wooden space, filled to the brim with food, is a paradise. An invisible war began the moment you boarded, and it is being fought every day in the shadows of the hull. It's a war for the survival of your food stores, and thus, for the fate of the Ark itself. Today, it's your turn to inspect the grain stores on the bottom deck with your father. This is the darkest, dampest part of the Ark, used primarily for storing the bulk of the grain and other reserve supplies. You carry oil lamps as you walk down the narrow corridors. The air is thick with the faint smell of mildew and dust. Your father asks you to scoop up some barley from a massive grain pile with a wooden shovel. In the dim lamplight, you examine the kernels closely. Suddenly, you notice tiny, perfectly round holes in some of the grains. Others are completely hollow, just an empty shell. You pour the grains onto your palm, and a few small, dark brown beetles, smaller than a grain of rice, crawl sluggishly among them. "Weevils," your father says. His voice is calm, but his brow is furrowed. Grain weevils are one of the oldest enemies of stored grain. They are a primary pest, meaning they can attack whole, healthy kernels without waiting for them to be broken or moldy. Their method of reproduction is what makes them so terrifying. The female weevil uses her long, snout-like mouthpart to drill a tiny hole in a grain kernel. She lays a single egg inside, then seals the hole with a gelatinous secretion. The process is so seamless it's virtually invisible to the naked eye. The larva hatches inside the kernel and spends its entire developmental stage eating the inside of the grain, hollowing it out. It then pupates and emerges as an adult. By the time you see an adult weevil crawling out of a kernel, its nutritional value is almost completely gone. It is estimated that a single pair of weevils under ideal conditions can produce up to 6 million offspring in a year. Besides weevils, you must guard against another, more destructive enemy, rats. These rodents not only steal grain, but, far worse, their droppings and urine contaminate vast quantities of food, rendering it inedible. They chew through sacks and containers, spilling grain everywhere, which in turn creates a perfect breeding ground for weevils and other secondary pests. Even more dangerously, they can gnaw on the wooden structure of the ark itself, posing a threat to the very vessel that keeps you alive. To combat these insidious enemies, you have no modern pesticides or mousetraps. You must rely on ancient, time-tested wisdom, a kind of ancient integrated pest management. Your first and most effective ally pads silently past your feet. It's a cat, its eyes glowing green in the darkness. Cats were first brought into human society thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt and the Fertile Crescent, precisely for their superior rat-catching abilities. They became the divine guardians of the granaries. In the closed ecosystem of the ark, a few healthy cats are the most effective and environmentally friendly biological weapon against a rodent infestation. Their very presence is a deterrent. In addition to biological control, you also employ chemical warfare, of a sort, various aromatic plants with pest-repellent properties. You see, your mother has hung bundles of dried herbs in the corners of the granary. You lean in and smell the cool scent of mint, the sweet fragrance of lavender, and the bitter aromas of plants called rue and wormwood. Through long observation, ancient people discovered that the strong scents of these plants effectively repelled insects and rodents. They didn't understand the chemistry, but experience taught them that it worked. And, of course, the most basic physical control is crucial, maintaining cleanliness. You regularly sweep up spilled grain and check that storage containers are sealed tightly. Some clay jars have a layer of wood ash mixed in with the grain at the top. This is an ancient trick. Wood ash is alkaline and very dry, which helps keep the grain dry and creates an inhospitable environment for mold and pests. Of course, the question of how to manage pests on such a massive scale, especially in a huge, enclosed wooden structure like the ark, has been a subject of much scholarly debate. The wooden hull itself would have been vulnerable to wood-boring pests like woodworms and shipworms. Ancient ships underwent a regular maintenance process called careening, where the ship was beached on its side and the hull was cleaned and protected using fire, tar, and sulfur. On the ark, which could not make landfall, did Noah and his family have their own system for continuous maintenance and pest control? It's a question that fascinates historians and naval engineers alike, but one for which we have no easy answers. You use the shovel to move the infested scoop of grain into a separate container for disposal. It will either be treated with heat or simply fed to the chickens and ducks on board. As you witness this silent, relentless, invisible war, you understand deeply that storing food and protecting food are two entirely different challenges. On this long voyage, you are fighting not only the storms and floods outside, but also these tiny yet deadly enemies from within. Every single grain of wheat saved is a small victory in this silent war. And the cat, rubbing against your leg and purring, now seems to you like a true hero, a fur-clad, unsung guardian of civilization. A day on the ark begins with the sounds of animals and ends with the sounds of animals. But among these sounds, there is one that is particularly comforting, the gentle bleating from the sheep pens. This sound represents not just life, but also a precious source of fresh food. At a set time each day, you and your sisters-in-law head to the sheep and cattle pens on the middle deck, carrying clay pots. Your targets are the lactating ewes, nanny goats, and cows. Milking is a skill that requires both technique and patience. You crouch beside a calm ewe, copying your sister-in-law's movements, using warm fingers to gently and rhythmically squeeze. A warm, white liquid, smelling richly of milk, streams into the pot below. Fresh milk is precious, but it is also perishable. In a world without refrigeration, especially in the warm, humid environment of the Ark, fresh milk will quickly spoil due to microbial growth. Therefore, apart from the small amount drunk on the day it is collected, most of the milk must be processed immediately into a more durable form. And so, the Ark's dairy processing plant gets to work. You watch as your mother places a large pot of sheep's milk in a warm spot next to the hearth to sit for a few hours. The process might seem mysterious, but it's a miracle of the microscopic world. Naturally occurring lactic acid bacteria present in the air and on the milking equipment begin to feed on the lactose, the sugar, in the milk. As they metabolize the lactose, they produce lactic acid, which increases the milk's acidity. When the acidity reaches a certain point, the casein proteins in the milk begin to coagulate, turning the entire pot of milk into a thick, tangy, custard-like substance. This is the most primitive form of yogurt. This accidental discovery was one of the greatest culinary inventions in human history. Archaeologists believe yogurt was first created around 5000 BC in Mesopotamia, almost concurrently with the domestication of milk-producing animals. It not only solved the problem of preserving fresh milk, but also came with an unexpected health benefit. You take a spoonful of the freshly set yogurt. It tastes very sour and has a thick texture. To make it more palatable, your mother might stir in a small amount of precious honey or a few chopped dried dates to balance the acidity. But this is not the final step. To preserve it for even longer, it must be turned into cheese. You watch as your sister-in-law pours the yogurt into a clay strainer lined with a fine linen cloth. Perforated strainers like these have been found in abundance at Neolithic sites across Europe. For a long time, archaeologists were unsure of their purpose, until milk residues were detected on them, confirming they were among the first cheese-making tools used by humans. The whey, the thin, yellowish liquid, slowly drips through the cloth and the holes in the strainer and is collected in a pot below. The whey, though it looks unassuming, is nutritious and can be used in soups or drunk on its own. What remains in the cloth is the increasingly concentrated and solid curd. When the curd is dry enough, your sister-in-law removes it and kneads in salt. Salt not only adds flavor, but is also a powerful preservative, drawing out more water and inhibiting the growth of harmful bacteria. The salted curd is then shaped by hand into small balls or patties and left to air dry in a ventilated spot. And just like that, the simplest form of soft, fresh cheese is made. It can be kept for several weeks. If stored in brine or olive oil, it will last even longer. There is a popular legend about the origin of cheese. An Arab merchant was traveling across the desert with a bag of milk stored in a pouch made from a sheep's stomach. The rennet remaining in the stomach lining, combined with the heat of the sun and the jogging motion of his journey, caused the milk to separate into curd and whey, thus creating the first cheese. It's a wonderful story, though likely a romanticized invention of later times. You pick up a small piece of the freshly made cheese. It's still salty and fragrant with the aroma of fresh milk. The texture is firm yet creamy, melting slowly on your tongue. This little piece of cheese is one of the few fresh delicacies on the Ark. It is more than just food. It is the crystallization of wisdom. It represents how humanity learned to cooperate with the invisible world of microbes, transforming a fleeting gift of nature into a long-lasting source of life-sustaining energy. On this floating ark, every time milk curdles into cheese, it is a small, quiet act of magic, a victory over time and decay. The air on the middle deck of the ark is always a complex medley of scents. Apart from the rich aroma of hay and fermentation from the herbivore section, as you walk to another area, a more primal, penetrating odor fills your nostrils. It is a dry, musky scent mixed with a faint hint of iron, the smell of blood. This is the territory of the carnivores. You walk cautiously past the enclosures of the lions, tigers, wolves, and bears. These predators spend most of their time sleeping to conserve energy. But when they occasionally open their golden eyes and let out a low, rumbling growl, you feel a primal chill rise from the pit of your stomach. A question that has been circling in your mind surfaces again. For this entire year, what on earth do they eat? You can't possibly feed them the cattle and sheep that are meant to repopulate the earth. That would be an ecological extinction event the moment you disembarked. The answer is hidden in a special meat locker located next to the carnivore section. You push open the door, and an intense, smoky, and salty aroma hits you. This room is nothing like the granary. It's more like a giant charcuterie workshop. You see rows of wooden racks hung with strips of dried meat. They are deep red, hard as firewood. In wooden barrels along the wall, large chunks of meat are buried in thick layers of rock salt. Other pieces have been smoked to a deep brown, exuding the rich aroma of cypress or hickory wood. This is Noah's kibble for the carnivores, meat preserved using some of humanity's oldest techniques. The first and simplest method is drying. Meat is cut into thin strips and thoroughly dehydrated in the sun and wind to make jerky. This method was common in the hot, dry climate of Mesopotamia. Without water, microorganisms cannot grow. The second method is salting. Salt was one of the most important strategic resources in the ancient world, its value sometimes equal to that of gold. Its preservative power comes from osmosis. A high concentration of salt acts like a pump, drawing water out of the meat cells and, more importantly, out of any bacteria on the surface, causing them to dehydrate and die. Salt also penetrates the meat, further inhibiting microbial activity. The third method is smoking. The smoke from burning wood contains natural antimicrobial compounds like phenols and aldehydes, which kill bacteria on the surface of the meat. The heat from the smoking process also helps to dry and partially cook the meat. The smoked surface forms a hard, protective pellicle, preventing external bacteria from entering and imparting a unique flavor. Used alone or in combination, these methods can preserve meat for months or even years. This wasn't just for the animals on the ark. It was the standard way humans preserved food for long journeys, trade caravans, and military campaigns. But this raises another question. Where did such a large quantity of meat come from? This leads to a topic filled with both theological and biological debate. Before the flood, were animals carnivorous? Some theological views hold that in the original Garden of Eden, all animals were herbivores, and meat eating was a consequence of the fall. If this is true, then perhaps the animals God sent to the ark had a natural potential to eat plants. Maybe for the year on the ark, they were temporarily switched back to a vegetarian diet. This idea sounds fantastic, but there have been surprising documented cases, such as a lioness named Little Tyke, who famously refused to eat meat her entire life, subsisting on a diet of grains, milk, and eggs. A more realistic theory is that Noah brought aboard dedicated feeder animals, creatures that reproduce quickly and have minimal dietary needs. Or perhaps animals with extremely slow metabolisms like giant tortoises, which could serve as living canned goods. Feasibility studies have also suggested that Noah might have cultivated large quantities of insects like mealworms or locusts, or even snails and earthworms, all excellent sources of protein. He might even have stored hibernating fish or vast quantities of fish eggs in large barrels of mud. You take a hard, stiff strip of jerky from a rack. It smells salty and savory. Before feeding time, these dried meats have to be soaked in water to rehydrate them. You look at the former apex predators, now waiting patiently in their enclosures for their ration of salted jerky. The scene has a certain surreal humor to it. You distribute the softened meat chunks to each of the eagerly waiting big cats. Listening to their satisfied sounds of chewing and tearing, you feel a strange sense of reassurance. This problem, this seemingly impossible carnivore's dilemma, was ultimately solved by human foresight and ingenuity. Whether through masterful food preservation techniques or the establishment of a complex multi-layered food chain on board, this ark successfully incorporated even the planet's fiercest predators into its orderly and sustainable rationing system. In the isolated world of the ark, there is something that is likely more valuable than gold. You cannot eat it or drink it on its own, but almost no food is complete without it. That something is salt. Today, your job is to help your mother organize and ration the three great treasures of the kitchen: salt, oil, and vinegar. These three are the cornerstones of food preservation and the soul of culinary flavor. You go first to where the salt is stored. It's kept in dry clay jars. Some of it is coarse salt scraped from salt marshes, while other jars hold crystals of sea salt from the coast. It looks grayish and impure, nothing like the refined white salt of the modern day, but the power it contains is immense. You already know how salt preserves meat through osmosis, but its uses are far more varied. It is essential in cheesemaking as a coagulant and preservative. In pickling vegetables, a brine solution creates an environment where only beneficial lactic acid bacteria can thrive, opening the door to the delicious world of fermented foods. Even a little salt added to bread dough improves its structure and flavor. The value of salt in the ancient world is hard for us to imagine. It wasn't just a seasoning, it was a form of currency. The English word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which was the money given to Roman soldiers to buy salt, *sal, to preserve their rations. Over time, the word evolved to mean any form of fixed payment. So, the next time you receive your paycheck, you can think of it as your salt money, just like a Roman soldier's thousands of years ago. Next is oil. Your oils come from two main sources: animal fats and plant seeds, like sesame and flaxseed. Besides providing calories and being used for cooking, oil is also an excellent preservation medium. You see a clay pot filled with dried meat submerged in fat. This is the ancient art of canned feed. The meat is first cured in salt, then cooked slowly at a low temperature in its own fat, and finally sealed in the pot, completely covered by that fat. The thick layer of oil acts as a perfect barrier against air and moisture, allowing the meat to be preserved for a very long time. Similarly, vegetables and herbs can be preserved in olive oil, a method that not only saves the food but also infuses the oil with wonderful flavors. Then there is vinegar. The vinegar on the ark is made from the natural fermentation of barley or grapes. Its acidity is another powerful weapon against spoilage. Soaking vegetables in vinegar, pickling, can dramatically extend their shelf life. Finally, you come to the most precious corner of the pantry. Here sits several tightly sealed clay jars. You open one, and a sweet, floral fragrance wafts out. Inside is a thick, golden liquid, honey. In the ancient world, before sugarcane was widely cultivated, honey was the most important and luxurious sweetener. It is also a magical natural preservative. Honey has an extremely low water content and a very high sugar concentration, creating immense osmotic pressure. Any microorganism that falls into it is rapidly dehydrated and killed. Furthermore, when bees make honey, they secrete an enzyme called glucose oxidase, which produces trace amounts of hydrogen peroxide, a natural disinfectant. For these reasons, pure honey virtually never spoils. On the ark, honey is exceedingly precious. Besides being an occasional sweetener, it is also used to preserve the most valuable fruits. You see a jar where a few plump apricots are suspended in the golden honey. On some special day in the future, these honeyed apricots will be a supreme delicacy, a source of immense comfort. You carefully reseal all the jars. These pots and containers hold more than just condiments and preservatives. They hold millennia of accumulated human wisdom. It is this wisdom that has given you the power to capture the bounty of nature, seal it away, and carry it with you into this isolated ark to endure the long, unknown journey ahead. After several months on the ark, monotony has become your greatest enemy. The daily routine is always the same. Wake up, grind flour, feed the animals, eat, check the hull, eat, sleep. The view outside the window is forever an unchanging canvas of gray water. Your food, though plentiful, is a repeating cycle of the same few things: barley bread, lentil soup, dried cheese, salted meat. Your taste buds have grown numb. You've even begun to lose your anticipation for mealtime. On one such bland afternoon, your father, Noah, does something that electrifies everyone. From a chest in the deepest corner of his room, he carefully brings out a small, exquisitely carved wooden box. He places it on the table and gently opens it. A wonderful, complex aroma, unlike anything you have smelled before, instantly fills the air. It is a mixture of warmth, spice, sweetness, and a hint of some exotic, faraway land. You lean in closer. The box is divided into many small compartments, each holding powders, seeds, or dried bark of different colors and shapes. Spices, your father says, a hint of pride in his voice. This small spice box was a gift from a merchant caravan from the east given to your father before you boarded the ark. In those days, spices were more precious than gold. Most of them came from distant lands like India, Sri Lanka, or the even more remote Spice Islands, what is now the Maluku Islands. They traveled along the long and perilous Silk Road and sea routes, passing through the hands of countless middlemen before reaching Mesopotamia. To monopolize the trade and inflate prices, Arab merchants concocted fantastical stories about the origins of these spices, describing their native lands as dangerous, almost hellish places. For example, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus recorded a story he heard from an Arab merchant that cinnamon grew on high cliffs in the nests of giant, ferocious birds. To get it, people had to leave out large chunks of meat as bait. The birds would carry the heavy meat back to their nests, which would then collapse under the weight, allowing the people to gather the precious cinnamon sticks from the ground. These incredible stories undoubtedly added to the mystique and value of the spices. Your father points to the contents of the box, introducing them one by one. The small pile of black powder is pepper, bringing a fiery kick. The curled pieces of bark are cinnamon, warm and sweet. The small shuttle-shaped seeds are cardamom with a delicate, elegant aroma. There is also ginger, cumin, coriander seed, and turmeric. Each one represents a flavor profile you have never experienced. That evening, when your mother makes the lentil soup, she makes an exception and adds a pinch of ground cumin and a few peppercorns. When the pot of ordinary soup is brought to the table, everyone is captivated by the new, exotic aroma. You take a sip. The familiar, bland lentil soup seems to have been infused with a soul. The exotic warmth of the cumin and the gentle heat of the pepper explode on your tongue, reawakening your long-dormant taste buds. It's a long-lost feeling called surprise. Besides the spices, your father's treasure chest holds another treat. He takes out a small bag of green nuts, cracked open as if they are smiling. Pistachios. The pistachio tree is native to Central Asia in places like Persia. In ancient times, they were considered a delicacy, a snack reserved for royalty. Legend has it that the Queen of Sheba decreed that all pistachios in her kingdom belonged to her, forbidding commoners from eating them. You are each given a few. You carefully pry open the hard beige shell to reveal the purple-skinned green nut within. The kernel is crisp and oily, with a unique, clean fragrance. The small, crunchy texture provides a stark contrast to the soft or hard foods you eat every day. These small moments of pleasure play an incredibly important role in the long, confined life on the Ark. They are not nutritionally necessary, but they are an essential psychological vitamin. They break the day-to-day monotony, provide new sensory stimulation, and most importantly, they connect you to memories of a beautiful past and hopes for a diverse future. A pinch of spice, a few nuts, they are like a splash of bright color in a gray existence, reminding you that the world once was and will be again a vibrant and colorful place. Of course, there is one other comforting luxury on the Ark: alcohol. Whether it's the daily ration of low-alcohol barley beer or the wine your father made from grapes, reserved only for special occasions, a moderate amount of alcohol can relax tense nerves and bring a sense of warmth and cheer. You savor the lingering aftertaste of cumin and pepper in your mouth. This small spice box is like a Pandora's box, but instead of releasing plagues, it has released wonderful flavors and moments of joy. It makes you realize that survival is not just about filling your stomach. Sometimes, a little bit of useless luxury, a little bit of a quest for flavor, is precisely what is needed to maintain your humanity and fight off despair. The journey enters its 7th month, or maybe its 8th. You've lost track. Time has lost its meaning here, becoming a thick, blurry, endlessly repeating gray gel. The sunrise and sunset are obscured by a thick blanket of clouds, leaving only faint shifts between light and dark. Your entire existence is compressed into this swaying, odor-filled wooden space. The initial novelty and fear have long since been replaced by a deeper, more corrosive emotion. A deep, soul-crushing weariness. A boundless monotony. You start to experience strange symptoms. Your sleep becomes shallow. You are easily woken by the slightest creak of the hull or a distant animal's cry. You often feel irritable and anxious for no reason. The smallest thing can trigger an argument with your brothers. At other times, you fall into a state of complete apathy, losing interest in everything, just sitting and staring blankly for hours. Your memory seems to be failing. You often can't remember what you did yesterday, feeling as if every day is just a carbon copy of the last. You don't know it, but you are experiencing the classic psychological effects of long-term confinement and sensory deprivation, which future generations would study in prisoners in solitary confinement, polar explorers, and astronauts. When humans are placed in a monotonous, low-stimulation, isolated environment for an extended period, our brains begin to malfunction. Anxiety, depression, irritability, confused thinking, even hallucinations. These are the protests of a fragile nervous system against an inhuman environment. In this psychological wasteland, food has become your only and final comfort. The times for preparing and eating meals have become the most important anchors in your life. The heavy rhythm of grinding flour, the tactile reality of kneading dough, the warm steam rising from a simmering pot. These concrete, focus-demanding physical tasks allow you to temporarily escape the endless wandering of your mind and focus on the present moment. Eating is no longer just about satisfying hunger. It has become one of the few events of the day that brings sensory stimulation and variety. You begin to develop an almost obsessive focus on food. You chew a piece of hard barley bread for a long time, trying to distinguish the subtle differences between each flake of bread. You hold a small piece of cheese in your mouth until it completely dissolves, feeling the slightest changes in its saltiness and creaminess. You even start to fantasize. While eating a bowl of lentil soup, you close your eyes and try to imagine it's a rich, savory meat stew simmered with fresh vegetables and herbs. Your craving for fresh food reaches an unprecedented peak. You desperately miss the crisp crunch of a cucumber, the juicy burst of an apple, a leaf of lettuce still fragrant with the smell of the earth. The sound of a crisp bite, the vibrant rush of juice, these have become the most common scenes in your dreams. Occasionally, you recall ancient stories of famine. In times of true starvation, what did people eat? Your grandparents told you that in years when the harvest failed, people would peel the bark from elm and pine trees, grinding the inner layer into a powder to mix with flour to make bark bread. They would dig up edible roots and boil weeds they would normally never glance at, like nettles and chickweed. In the most desperate times, people would even eat dirt, leather, anything to fill their stomachs. Thinking about this brings a complex mix of emotions. On one hand, you feel a sense of relief. Compared to those struggling through famine, your situation is far better. You have ample food, a warm shelter, and no worries about where your next meal will come from. But on the other hand, this comparison only intensifies your suffering. Your misery comes not from having nothing, but from having only this. Only this food, only this space, only these 8 people. It is a poverty of abundance, a spiritual starvation while being materially sustained. You look down at the bowl of eternally unchanging lentil soup and suddenly realize that your greatest challenge may not be a shortage of food, but the withering of the soul. How to stay sane, how to maintain hope, how to hold on to the feeling of being human during this despairingly long voyage, this question is far more difficult to answer than how to feed a lion. And the answer, it seems, is still hidden in those monotonous bowls of food. They are both the source of the problem and its only cure. In the endless waiting, the ark's journey finally reaches a turning point. One day, you feel the vibrations of the hull cease. The gentle, constant rocking that has been your reality for a year is gone, replaced by a solid, long-forgotten stillness. The ark has run aground. According to your father's calculations, it has come to rest on one of the peaks of the Ararat mountain range. After many more long days, as the water level continues to recede, the tops of the surrounding mountains begin to emerge from the water like small islands. Your father decides it is time to send out a scout to survey this new world. He opens the great window on the roof of the ark. A rush of fresh air, crisp with the scent of water and the chill of the high mountains, floods in, making you shiver. It is the first time in over a year that you have breathed the outside air. First, your father releases a raven. The black, wild bird flies out without hesitation and disappears into the gray sky. In your culture, the raven is an unclean bird. It is a scavenger, particularly fond of carrion. Releasing it is a practical, almost cold-hearted ecological test. If the raven does not return, it means there is now land, and on that land, there are enough carcasses for it to feed on. The raven's failure to return brings the first message: the old world is dead, but the land of a new world has appeared. A week later, your father sends out a second scout, a dove. The dove is the raven's opposite. It is a clean bird, gentle in nature, feeding on seeds and fruits. It is a symbol of life and hope. The dove flies out, circles for a long time, and finally returns, landing tiredly on your father's hand. It found no place to rest, no food to eat. This means that although land has been exposed, life has not yet returned. After another week of waiting, your father releases the dove again. This time, everyone holds their breath, waiting beneath the open window. At dusk, the familiar white shape finally appears on the horizon. It flies back, landing directly on your father's shoulder. And this time, everyone sees it. In its beak, it holds a small, tender green leaf. In that instant, a wave of pure elation washes over the ark. People cheer, hug, and weep. That tiny leaf is a more powerful proclamation than any words could ever be. The flood is over. Life has returned. Your father carefully takes the leaf from the dove's beak. It is an olive leaf. The olive tree is incredibly resilient. Even after being submerged for a long time, its roots and branches can sprout anew. This leaf is the very first greeting from a world washed clean. You bring the olive leaf to your nose and smell a scent you had almost forgotten. It is the scent of freshness, a mixture of sunlight, dew, and living green things. It is completely different from the smell of any dried hay, dried fruit, or spice in the ark. It is the vibrant, green scent of life itself. Seeing the longing in your eyes, your father does something astonishing. He tears the tiny olive leaf into 8 minuscule pieces and gives one to each person present. You receive a piece no bigger than your fingernail. You hesitate for a moment, then, as if taking part in a sacred ritual, you place it in your mouth. Your teeth gently bite down. A burst of fresh, slightly bitter and peppery juice explodes in your mouth. The taste is so alien, so shocking. After a year of eating food that was only dry, salty, or soft, your palate experiences the sensation of crispness for the first time. For the first time, you taste the flavor of life itself. That little bit of bitterness at this moment tastes sweeter than the sweetest honey. This tiny olive leaf is your first meal in the new world. It has no calories and cannot fill your stomach, but it fills your spirit in a way nothing has before. You chew it slowly, not wanting to swallow. You feel as if you are not eating a leaf, but an entire spring. From this day on, the atmosphere on the ark changes completely. The numb waiting is replaced by hopeful anticipation. Even the daily meals don't seem so hard to swallow anymore, because everyone knows that soon you will be able to taste more real food from the newborn land. When the dove is released a third time and does not return, you know it is time. Your father finally opens the great door of the ark, which has been sealed for over a year. Blinding sunlight streams in, and you have to shield your eyes. Fresh air, smelling of damp earth and wet plants, rushes into the hull like a tide, washing away the stale, complex odors of confinement. You take a deep breath, feeling as if your very lungs are being cleansed. You hold on to the door frame and walk shakily down the ramp. Your feet touch solid, still, damp ground for the first time. You look down and see small, unknown green shoots already sprouting at your feet. In the distance, the hillsides are covered in a carpet of new green. A clear stream flows down from the mountains, sparkling in the sun. The world has been reborn. After all the animals have been released from the ark to return to the wild, the first thing Noah does is not to build a shelter or to till the land. He gathers some stones and builds a simple altar on the open ground. Then, from the clean animals that were brought aboard, he selects some of each kind and offers them as a burnt offering to God. Watching the smoke from the cattle, sheep, and doves rise to the sky from the altar's fire, you finally understand. You understand why God commanded you to bring 7 pairs of every clean animal, but only 1 pair of the unclean. The extra ones were for this moment. It is an act of faith, an expression of the deepest gratitude to God for his salvation. It is also an investment. Noah is offering the first fruits, trusting that God will bless the remaining animals so they will be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. After the ceremony, you begin your first foraging expedition in the new world. Your brothers go to the stream to fish. You and your mother search the nearby hillsides for edible plants. You find some wild leeks, some spicy mustard greens, and other familiar herbs. As evening approaches, you build a campfire. This is not the carefully controlled hearth of the ark, but a roaring, free-spirited blaze. The fish caught from the stream are cleaned, skewered on branches, and roasted over the fire. There is no salt, no spices, just pure fire and fish. Soon, an indescribable aroma fills the air. It is the sound of fat sizzling as it drips into the flames, and the rich, smoky scent that rises with it. It is unlike any food you have smelled before. It doesn't have the deep complexity of a stew or the rustic simplicity of baked bread. It has only one flavor: freshness. The fish is cooked. The skin is crispy and charred, but the meat inside is flaky, white, and tender. You eagerly take a bite. The delicious flesh, with a hint of the stream's sweetness, melts in your mouth. You can even taste the faint smokiness from the fire. You pick a few leaves of the wild greens you just gathered and eat them with the fish. The slight bitterness and clean taste of the greens perfectly cut through the richness of the fish. This meal is the absolute antithesis of every meal you ate on the ark. The food on the ark was from the past, preserved, artificial, complex, salty, and dry. This meal is of the present, fresh, natural, simple. You have not used a single item from the ark's stores. This meal is a pure gift from the new world. As you eat the roasted fish, you look at the sunset painting the sky. A brilliant rainbow stretches across the horizon after the rain. You feel as if you, too, have been reborn. Everything you endured over the past year on the ark, the labor of grinding flour, the monotonous diet, the oppressive confinement, the war against pests, the uncertainty of the future, all of it dissolves in this moment with this one bite of fresh fish. You finally understand. The ultimate meaning of food may not lie in the complexity of its flavors or the rarity of its ingredients, but in its connection to a living, breathing land. On the ark, you ate the memory of the past. But now, here, you are eating the hope of the future. And this simple, elemental dinner is the first delicious promise you have made with this new world.